Okay, so on the you'll see this tile where with a plus sign, and I can click on that, and I can select from tiles that I do that I want to display on the dashboard. I've actually displayed everything that's currently available, and we're aiming at every 2 to 3 months to release a couple of tiles more for you to choose from. But there's other features too. I can, if you do not want that tile, you'll see there's a remove button. I can change the where I want them placed. I just simply drag and drop, and you'll see that that's moved that tile back down to there and put the frequency rate at the top there. I'll put that back there. Some of the tiles, depends, but some of them have the ability to make them small or large. All right, simple as that. I can also change the time period for the data. So if you prefer to look at it for the last 30 days, there is that feature there. All right. And once you've made your changes, you can click on Save Dashboard. Okay. A couple of more things and then I'll keep moving along from the dashboard. But also here, like this one here, this tile, My Due Actions and My Open Events, they are hyperlinks. So for example, if I click on that, it opens up a new version of, if you may not be aware of it, which leads me to my next point, is My Stems. You may not be aware of that. So you'll see here there's My Events, My Schedule, and My Actions. My Actions is a new one, and we've also improved the user interface there as well. All right, so have a look at that. I'm just going to encourage you in your own time to have a look at these different features under My Stems. Play around and get familiar with that. It's a much better layout. My Actions used to be within My Events, and we've now given them their own dedicated page. There's also that's basically My Scheduler, and will show the current month's calendar, and this would highlight anything that's got basically overdue. It will also show to do with due items as well. All right, well, I am going to keep moving along, again, due to time restraints. The next subject that I'm going to move on to is using registers. This is quite a common, probably every day, whether it's through support or meetings we may be having with customers, whatever it may be. This is probably one of the most common requests, I guess, or people, and bottom line is, are not fully aware of this, which highlights we are going to be working on more wording on the screen to help the user be aware of basically hidden features. I'll use two registers to show this. So I'll start with the action register. Now with these types of registers, what we'd call an advanced view, if you right click on any column header, you'll see I have other features available. And this one here, columns. So you can choose what columns you do or don't want to display. So for example, the origin of where those actions come from, I could display origin ID, title, and type. We've put this out before in tips and tricks, but again, you may not have been aware of that. And that becomes very handy for being able to see where those actions are coming from, giving you a bit more detail than just literally showing that it's from an event, for example, or from Comply 1. I can actually see, for example, this Comply 1 action is from a form called Vehicle Pre-Start Inspection and the origin type inspection register. Handy for events as well is I can see that it's come from a restricted work case with this action here. So have a play around with these as well, these features, because there's quite a lot you can do. And once you've designed the register how you want to see it, you could then click on Save My Grid Settings, and that will only affect your view. It will not affect any other user's view. It might be depending on what your requirements are, but for example, I could group by origin, and that will group the actions into where they're coming from. You can also multiple group, so I could break that down further, for example, down to origin title. If I think about it from Comply 1, I could, it would then group the actions in relation to each form. Another common one while we're looking at this, and this would apply to a lot of registers, is the status. This comes up probably 2-3 times a week. People are looking for records and they cannot find them. For example, in the action register, by default, it will not display closed actions. Likewise with events, it will not display closed events or incidents. So be aware of that. If you're looking for something, you cannot find it, it may be a closed one. You just select closed. Just click away in a blank or white part of the screen, and now it's also displaying those. A couple of other little tips that is available in pretty much every register and report is these 2 tick boxes, depending on your permissions, of course. Include records associated with archived org items. Now that's in relation to, for system administrators in the organization structure, you can actually archive organization items. For example, a project that may have finished and you want to close that project off and keep the historical data without any new data being associated with it. The downside to that is by default, it won't be available, for example, here for me to select from. But if I tick that, the screen will refresh, and now when I go into here, it will display any archived organization items. Now, while we're looking at this, I will quickly show another feature on this segment of the webinar, is the right-click feature for organization structure selection. If I right-click here, you'll see I've got an expand all, and I could do that, and then it expands it out. You will have noticed also I could right-click and select all, and that will select that item and all child items underneath. Another feature, I'll just unselect there, is I might want to, and think of this not just with this register, this is all of these registers. It is also for reports, this feature that we're seeing. And where relevant when entering data as well. If I, for example, had an item that appears multiple times, just see if I can quickly find an example. All right, administration department appears multiple times. Rather than me searching through the organization structure to select wherever it appears, I could just right-click and select all instances and either select the item only or its child items as well that are underneath it. And then click on that, and it will go through and find wherever administration appears and select it and its child items. And then finally, another way to do things is I could say, if I wanted to run a report just on our departments, so that's the italics there, and the organization item type. So rather than the item itself, I want to select all departments. What I do there is select by type. All right, and again, I'll just go through there and select that, and it'll go through and select all of those and its child items in that instance that I've done. All right, so, finally, this other tick box I forgot to mention, include archived records. So that's a good feature. Also, if you're looking for a record, you think you cannot find it, or you think that STEMS has lost it, which I guarantee Stems will not lose any records. It will be hidden by things like a status or the fact it's archived, or it may even be associated with an archived org item. They're the three main areas of why people often cannot find a record. It'll be something to do with one of those three features. All right, I'm going to just very quickly, I said I'd show the event register, but I'm probably really better off showing there's a report that people are often not aware of, and that's this one here, event details. This is where you'll find a lot of event information. So all the fields are available in this report, because often people want more fields added to the advanced view of the event register, but we won't be doing that. The best place to go to is this report, and you'll see there are a large number of fields available for you to utilize. And again, that right-click feature is available. All right. This one here, this tick box, if I tick that, it does also make archive records and archived organisation items available. All right, and then on that same subject, sorry about that, the screen flashing around, is in HR reports, if you have access to that. The same principle with events, this personnel list is the same thing. This is all of the fields available for personnel profiles. So this is where you could access that data from. All right, so I should keep moving along. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time because there is a lot to cover. So we'll move on to, we are pretty much there to do with personnel was my next subject. With personnel, just a couple of quick tips that people are often not aware of. All right, so that's in personnel register, and people are often not aware of bulk update if your permissions allow. So if, for example, you're shifting personnel from one project to another, or you're changing their roles, or whatever it may be, obviously on the individual, you could use the work history tab and make changes from here. That same feature is also available on the work details tab, but you could bulk shift people. So it's simply click on bulk update. You could use the filters here, for example, select the personnel on a particular project. And then once you've filtered down to those people and you've selected them, I'll just select a few here to give a quick example. Down the bottom left here on the menu, I click on update work history, and you'll see there's that same feature there. And I could, in the scenario I've used, change the organization structure they're assigned to. And I just select that new project I want to shift them to. Obviously make sure you put in a date from. Another quick tip, you can historically, as in backdate, or you could future date. Now with future date, that's handy because the change will not apply until it reaches that date. A couple of other very quick things on personnel. I'll just go back to the personnel register. There was a recent new way of categorizing personnel. Obviously, we've had personnel level for a very long time, but we now have personnel type, and that is a settings feature. That is in here for those system administrators. You'll see personnel type. All right. We are aiming at making that so you could rename it, but at the moment it is hard-coded to personnel type, but we will be giving the ability to use your own terminology there in the near future. Some customers are now using this to put, say, for example, the contractor company name that they're associated with. So, for example, personnel level could say contractor, and then type could show the company. It's an optional feature, but it is there and available. It's also available in the filters on the left here. Another thing to do with personnel, I should actually quickly point this out, sorry. It's a common question or a common mistake. What I'm leading to is quite often people start putting their contractors in the associates register. We strongly discourage that. The personnel register is designed for all of your workforce, contractors, direct employees, service providers, whatever you're wanting to keep a track of. So be aware of that. The associates register, because we do often people asking us to add more features to the associates register. We will not be doing that. There is no need to duplicate the capability in the personnel register. The idea behind associates, and it does explain on the page, is that it is for people outside of your workforce. So for example, if there was an incident and it involved a person in the public that was injured or involved in a traffic accident and you want to record their details, this is the register to do it from. You can either add directly from here, but you can do it directly on the incident or event report and also on the hazard report. It does give you that capability to add those names on the fly. All right. Now, one more thing I'm going to show here is there's quite a few things, ID cards and so on, but I'm going to move on to a feature that people are often not aware of, bulk file download. So if you have a situation where you have some of your workforce, for example, being sent to a client site and they're requiring their documents, this gives you the ability to select individuals' names, and you could, for example, say that I need their training certificates. This will be the files only, and some features like this says download files related to current active valid records. So I've selected training. I might also say select license. And then over here on the far right, I could actually select specific courses if I wanted to. If you don't select anything specifically, it will download all that are current if that is ticked. This feature here is just if you want to filter the personnel on the left here by using the organization structure selector. And once you click on download, it will zip the files down to the individual's names, and in those it will collate into a training folder in this example and a license folder. If you ticked medical, it'll create another folder if there's any files on that tab of that personnel and collate medical files as well. So it does a really good, neat job of collating everything into files so it's easily found. It really just comes down to you with the naming of your files. Obviously, make sure you've got good naming conventions for your files. And that's how you could make the most of that. All right, I am going to keep moving along. Time is starting to slip away on me. What I'm going to have to move on to, I'll just quickly, very quickly show, you may not be aware, but with role profiles, you can set up roles and set up minimum requirements for those roles, which is very handy for the training matrix, which we will also briefly look at soon. And the role matrix shows you what you've set up. Very quickly, it's very easy. You click on new role, give it a name. It's optional to put a description, and it's optional to assign to a part of the organization structure. On the role itself, there's features where you could copy the role, and what that will do is copy what you've already set up as minimum requirements for that role. There's even a recent feature we've added here that if you wanted to archive that role but remove people, traditionally you could do that through the bulk personnel changes, but we've now added a feature where you could do that from here as well, which is a lot easier from here. We would highly recommend that if you're planning to archive this, use this feature to remove them. It's not where you add people to a role. Adding people to a role will be done through their profile or through the bulk changes. All right. So what I'm going to look at next, very briefly, is Organisation Profile Register. And this is sort of in relation to roles, and there's quite a few other features. So setting up minimum training and license requirements for roles. Likewise, people think, and we've seen people do it, is try to cater for setting up inductions for a part of the business, setting up those minimum training requirements. So it might be a site-specific induction or the general induction for the whole business. The best place to do that, so setting up, for example, site requirements, is through the Organisation Profile Register. And how that is utilised is whatever you've set up in the organisation structure is available to set up here. And to set something up, if there's obviously check first to see if it's already been set up in the profile register. Otherwise, just click on here, select that organisation item, click on Create New. Excuse that, a job we've got to deal with, obviously the way it's squashing up the file. And just click on Update. There are other features here, which I'm not going to get into, but have a look at these features. But once I click on Update, I can just close that out, and now it'll be available for me to utilise. Search for it, there it is. And what I could do is click on the training profile, and it's just like the role requirements, or similar. It does look different, but the same principle is there. And I could select, for example, say the exploration department induction that's required, and I just select that and click on assign selected courses. And what that would do is then set that as a minimum requirement for any personnel in any way associated with that item. So either they're directly assigned to that organisation item, or it is a parent item of the organisation item they're assigned to. There are some other features here. This is an area where sometimes customers say, how can we manage our contractor companies, where we want to keep track of, maybe their insurances and just general notes on them. This is probably the best we can offer. It's a good basic way of keeping track of that information. So I could put in, say, who their main contacts are. I could put in comments. So, for example, I might have had an important phone call or email. I could actually record that information here. All right, so that's what that's about. I can attach important files here as well. I could raise actions from here. So it might be an action that's directly in relation to that department or to that contracting company. I could do that from here. Notifications, this is where I could set up those reminders. Maybe it's to do with their insurance paperwork that we need them to submit every year. Other examples I've heard, their electrical license, whatever that may be, this is where you could set up that notification. I'll make clear, though, the one limitation is this isn't available externally for your contracting company to manage. They would have to be a user to be able to self-manage this. Otherwise, this would still require you to directly manage the data in here. All right, I'll keep moving along. Next, we're going to look at user security. This is another common issue that does come up, and we're fully aware of it, and we do have plans. We've done all the, analysis of ongoing improvements for setting up new users. All right, so as we're all aware with STEMS accounts, it is from here that we invite a new user. And so when you click on invite, if you invite a mobile only user or a STEMS user, well, actually you'll see account owner, STEMS admin and STEMS user, and then mobile only. Briefly explaining these, An account owner can access the subscription of your account. Stems admin can do everything an account owner can except for the subscription. That's the only difference there. And both of these users can invite users and manage users. So they are essentially a system administrator. Now, what happens next? It's pretty easy at this point. You put their email address in, select what type of user you want them to be. And from that point, once they activate their login, once they've activated their login, that's probably not a good place to, I won't use that example there, sorry. I'm going to drag across what I hope is to be a good example of this. I'm just going to bring up what I hope to be an example. I won't be long here. I'm just preparing an example. Something I'd hoped I'd prepared sooner. All right, I'll just bring that across to the screen. It doesn't look like it's going to show that. Sorry, hang on a sec. No. All right, it's not going to allow me to show it. Bear with me for a moment. I have practiced this, but I'm going to have to turn the screen off and turn it back on to do this. Okay, so that should come on in a moment. All right, so what we're looking at here is the user security section. So again, this is obviously for system administrators. But once that user has activated their login, you will have a couple of more jobs to do. So it is important to come back into here and just check. And what we do is we highlight the cells that need in orange that need to be addressed. So in this case, this user needs their security role assigned. 9 times out of 10 with new users, you'll have to do both primary organization structure and security role. Now with the security role, you can just click on edit role here and select the security role that you want to give them. Now with the account owner side point, by the way, everyone, you can have multiple account owners, no worries there. The account owner and Stems admin user from Stems accounts are automatically system administrators, so you won't need to do anything. Also, a mobile only user, their security role is by default mobile only user. Well, I shouldn't say by default, that is it. They are stuck with mobile only user. But for Stems users that you've invited, you will have to address this, assign their security role. And once that's assigned, if you've also, and pretty much all other users, you will have to at least address primary organization structure. So that is done over here, user data filter and organization structure. Now it's at this point I will say that we find the majority of support where it is a case of this person cannot see this, or why can't they do that? 9 times out of 10, besides permissions, it will be this, the user data filter. So going back to, first of all, assign their organization structure, you look for that user, select them and assign what part of the organization structure they're going to apply to. And if you apply them to an organization item, by default, their permissions apply to that part of the organization structure. So that's all you need to do maybe for most users, but we obviously have the flexibility for different scenarios. So I could say, well, no, I don't want it to be primary. I want their permissions to apply to all of the organization structure. And then finally, there is a custom option. All right, so if I click on that, I have to click on the save button. Actually, it would help if I assigned organization structure. And this is where I then can customize where I want their permissions to apply. And then down the bottom there, click on save. All right, so I better keep moving along. I am trying to make you, within reason, briefly aware of these features, because this is a common support query. All right, so be aware of that, and that will be one of those common issues. We are going to do more to assist. We're fully aware of that. I was starting on that earlier, that the new user process does need to be improved to assist any of you that are system administrators. We're going to be having pop-up for system admins, making it very clear to them that there are users in here that need to be addressed. So because we realize we've got to draw your attention to that and address it. So even after today's session, if you haven't checked for a while, go into admin user security and have a look for these orange cells, because they will it will affect that user basically cannot use the software until that's addressed. Also, by the way, you can reallocate user items. So if you're going to archive a user through STEMS accounts, by the way, that is where you remove users, which archives them automatically in here. But you can click on reallocate items, and this lets you assign items from one user to another. All right, so it'll show here if they've got any incidents or actions that they're still assigned to. And by the way, that would only be open records. Any historic data, it will never be lost. If it's an action that's been closed out, that user's name, even if they've been removed, as in archived, they will forever have their name associated with that action. So you have no worries about that. This reallocation is just for shifting live data to, as in open data, to other users. You can even split that up. So if there were multiple events and you wanted to split it up to different users, I just click on that and it opens up another page again where I can individually select and reallocate. All right, I'm going to keep moving along. There's quite a lot in there with user security alone, but we are going to be having dedicated what do you call it? Bear with me. Dedicated webinars to these sections we're covering, and they're all going to be announced soon. All right, I'll keep moving along. I just want, Billy, if you can confirm with me that we can now see the dashboard screen, that'd be greatly appreciated. The next thing I'm going to touch on is settings. All right, so in admin settings, oh, it's off to the side again, thank you. I forgot to do that. My apologies, guys. You were putting up with that again on the screen when I was showing the user security. All right, my apologies, but I'll have to keep moving along. Okay, with settings, there's quite a lot. Just I'm not going to go into showing them, but there is a risk matrix designer. Often people are not aware of this. They think they may be stuck with the risk matrix they have. It might be our default one that you're still using, not aware that you can change it. You can freely go in here. It's a really good risk matrix designer. There is quite a lot you can do. And you can even create a draft one that you want to build. I would say this is if you do decide to build one, don't be afraid to go to support and maybe ask for our assistance. There are user guides on this, and it's a really good user interface for building it, that I will say, but there is a lot of complexities. And so we are more than happy to help. These are the human resource settings. This is where you'd set up your driver's license, for example. Licenses, by the way, that you see throughout STEMS is for driver's licenses. We would highly recommend that when it comes to, for example, high-risk licenses, set them up in your course register. And in here in training course type, a good example is put in high-risk license as a way of categorizing that course. Another tip is course owner. With course owner, the idea or intent behind that, we do explain that at the top, would be for example, if you have a customer, I'll use an example, say BHP, and they've got their courses like their induction that you do want to track. This is where you would set up BHP and then in the course register assign their induction to BHP course owner. It's not to be confused with the course provider. For example, First Aid St. John's is a course provider, but that's not its intent. The whole idea behind these, the end result is when you look at the training matrix, and this is where it comes into play. Okay, so I'm here, training matrix, and the benefit is that I could, for example, just select BHP because they've requested a training matrix and they only want to see their courses. Bear with me, I'm going to take a drink of water here because of my voice. So be fully aware of that. And I would suggest that for any courses that your client doesn't require, that you are tracking, regardless of whether they're external courses like working at heights, confined space, first aid, I would highly recommend that you have a course owner that represents your business name and you assign all those courses to them. Whether they're internal or external, if they're not in relation to a customer, we recommend doing that. You'll see course type, there's an example there. So that's really handy if I wanted to just run a training matrix just on our VOCs or our high risk license. I could do that. Down here, if I wanted to run a training matrix on requirements based on roles and organisation profiles and include customs, I can just tick these and any custom requirements on the personnel profiles. I just suggest unticking these two because what that does is still display everything. This filters right down to just requirements and then I can generate the matrix. We also recently added the feature of being able to save your filter settings and save grid settings. We've got more work going on as we speak, adding more filters here now. They'll be coming out soon and more options available here for selection as well. They'll be coming out soon. But these were recent features added already, save filter settings and save my grid settings. Eventually, the end goal is where you'll be able to save an actual risk, a variety of risk matrices. That will be our end goal, where you could have preset different training matrices ready to go for others to access. But for now, that's the best we can offer there. All right, back to settings, and I better start wrapping that up. So there's quite a lot that I keep moving. I'm not going to be covering all of the settings, of course. I'm going to finish on this, that with event reporting settings, it's also quite common how many people are not aware how much they can change. While we understand there's still lots of things, we have quite a lot of work going on as we speak with event reporting, and I might be able to touch on that at the end of this session. There is a lot you can do. It's quite amazing how many people are not aware of what you can do. If you go to safety and then click on event management, if you go to event record X event form, now its primary intent, this page, is to link any forms you've created up with event record. But you will also see your event reporting structure that you've got set up. And a side point of that is you can have different levels. So you'll see we've got the record, form, type, categories, and we can also have subcategories. The big tip I would give everyone is have less types and more categories and subcategories. It makes reporting a lot tidier, where you can simplify your reporting down to just types, and if need be, you could provide people with a breakdown of those types. And that's all managed here. You can customize your own types, categories, and subcategories over here on the menu on the left, which I'm not going to get into in any great detail. I will explain with Event Record. I've seen people do this. I've got to make this very clear. The idea behind Record is to create sub-registers of the event register. It is not, and we've seen people do it, where they put injury record, damage record, and so on. That is not its intent. That is what the forms and types are for, to help break that down. Be aware of that, and hopefully what you see on the screen there is a good example of what its intent is. The form register, you can build your own custom forms. The customization is very limited, and that's another part of this big project going on at the moment, to allow for a lot more customization with the forms, and you should see that in the coming months as well. Okay, I will keep moving. Oh, sorry, I will just finish off. This is where you can customize your own contributing factors, root causes. You're seeing a lot on the screen there that I just need to keep going over. Part of body, nature of injury, and so on that are on the injury form, that is all completely customizable. There's event other settings. You may see this tick box on the event form, high potential and notifiable. They are completely customizable. You can turn them off. You can use other terminology. You could just change this and use it for something else. And these other features are where you can decide to make things optional. So this is where if the investigation tab is used, you could force the user to select at least one contributing factor and one root cause by changing that to mandatory. Risk scores on the forms, you could also turn them off, make them optional or mandatory. On the forms itself, you could make it mandatory if you haven't already. We do have that as a default, but for some of our customers who have been for a lot longer, check those, because that will then force the user to select at least one item from each of those categories. You could also make actions mandatory, so that the user cannot close out an event before they've added one action, at least one action. The general tab, all these fields now, for a long time now, you've been able to relabel them, make them mandatory, optional, or turn them off. A more recent addition was the completion due date, where you could actually you could turn that off completely, of course, or you could set a standard time frame where it might be 2 or 3 weeks for that incident to be closed out. And so on. So there's quite a lot there. I better keep moving along with our time frame. So be aware of that. Make yourself familiar with settings. Again, feel free to ask for any assistance if you're wanting to make some changes. We're quite happy to assist if you do want to make any changes in your settings. All right. We're down to what I'm going to show very briefly. For those using Comply One, or maybe thinking about using the Comply One app, although it is used by basically close to 99% of our customers, it is a form builder. All right, I'll just go back here, sorry. So this is the application here. It is fully integrated with STEMS. So for example, any actions you raise, hazards, they will automatically appear in the action and hazard registers in STEMS. Likewise, personnel information, when I say information, their names and all that are available for selection in Comply One users and so on. Now this form builder, it is young, it's 2.5 years old, thereabouts, or a little bit older. Obviously, it's not going to be as good as iAuditor. But I would estimate within about 12 months to 18 months from now, we should see pretty much the same kind of flexibility. We're constantly doing more and more work, obviously reducing the amount of limitations there are. Those of you that have been using it, be fully aware of those limitations, which I won't get into right now. But overall, for most forms, inspections, observations, and so on, it's a pretty straightforward to set up. For forms with more complications where you require a different set of responses for individual questions, that's where the limitations can come in. What it currently only allows is once you set up a response for a set of questions, it will apply to all questions, but we are working on addressing that as well. Okay, some tips I've got on Comply One that people may not be aware of. I'm just going to focus on that. So some months ago, we released the non-compliance register. That's the first of many to come conditions that you can set, or rules. And in settings, all you need to do is go into your column designer, and whatever responses you've got set up, you could actually go into those responses and say, if the user, for example, selects no for this, I want the response to appear in the non-compliance register. So the handy thing is, if someone on a mobile app is filling out a form, answering questions, once they submit that, though, that individual response of no will appear in the non-compliance register. So it will cherry pick that out and put that in here. So you don't have to go sifting through the completed forms to find that. All right, some other things with another tip that you may not be aware of. With in the template section, there is the ability to select, there's multiple assets, but if you use the single asset field, this one here, this is linked, or both those fields are linked with the STEMS asset register. So the user could select, the end user on the app could select the asset from the asset register and also put in its odometer reading or hour reading. And that will update the odometer or hour reading on the asset profile in STEMS automatically and trigger any notification profiles you have set for that. I'll keep moving along because this time is slipping away on me. Forms, subheadings, and questions. This is, while we don't have the ability yet to just quite literally copy a template from here, or it doesn't look like you can copy your questionnaire, there is this feature here. When you click on Add New, if you select Load Existing Form Data, this selects from your form subheadings and questions. So if you've set something up and you want to build something similar, but just change a few questions and subheadings, this might be a good option for you. By doing that, it is literally copying a form you already have set up. And I click on that, and then I could just give it a new name. So I might say, well, I'm going to make that heavy vehicle pre-start inspection, and the other one's going to be light vehicle, for example. All right. A point I must make clear, and it is quite admittedly a flaw that we are going to address. It's a critical one. While you're building these, just be aware as you're going through, you'll need to at least select one header, column, and footer before you can save it. We need to address that. We're the first to admit that, so that it automatically saves as you're going along. And the same with form subheadings. In the meantime, until we have addressed that, be aware of that and make sure to save your work as you're going along. And then finally, any changes you do make, be aware of this feature here to apply your changes to associated profiles. So that's the end result that it's referring to. The form profiles is where there would be forms published for the end user. But if you're making changes in settings, you need to apply those changes to any form profiles using the form. Okay, I'll keep moving along. Sorry, I'll say that very quickly. Reports. We had a new report added called Create Dashboard Report, which is preparing a way for a dashboard for Comply One. But even now you can build these reports. You'll see here, dashboard report. And I can, for example, completed forms. I want to do a count on that and say the last 12 calendar months. I could select what part of the business I want that to apply to. Although I'm going to give you a little tip on this subject with organisation structure. If I leave that blank, I'll show you what I mean shortly. And by default, it's going to apply to all forms, or I could select specific forms if I wanted to. And I'll just save that. Now, if you give users, there is a permission to give users view only to reports. By the way, sorry, the data displays down here where it's coming from. And I can export out to Excel. But if I go into here, if you make those reports available and with no organisation structure selection, as in it's left blank, it does pick up on the user security of the user. So if a user only belongs to a certain department or project, when they click on this report, they will only see data in relation to their part of the business. So that's where it's handy to. So you don't have to create the same report for different parts of the business. Just leave that blank and you can 100% trust the user's security for the end user will only see data in relation to their part of the business. And I'll just finish showing there's quite a lot you can do here. You'll see here I could build one to do with non-compliance, everything that's coming in from there. I could it picks up on any custom fields you've designed to do with persons. You'll see here I've got one to do with the vehicle inspection. I've got a passenger field, so I could build one just on that if I wanted to. There's one to do with assets, hazards, and action counts. So these are ways of getting counts on that. And we will continue to build on the options available here to choose from. All I can recommend is have a good look at this and build on that. And in conjunction with that, you can also build your own notification profiles for things that are completed. You'll see items that are overdue, that's scheduled ones, completed items, and so on. We are yet to build one. I think that's going on as we speak for non-compliance. So at the moment, you cannot build a notification profile for anything that comes in here. We're fully aware of that and we'll address that very soon. I'm going to keep moving along and we're going to look at the mobile apps very briefly because I have pretty much run out of time. And I'm going to bring the mobile apps up on the screen. What I will say, everyone, is the mobile apps are available in both Apple and Android. Feel free to, if you're a STEMS user, any STEMS user can use the mobile apps. It's not an extra cost. Only the mobile only user, so you saw before inviting a user, the mobile only user is a cost of $3 a month and they can use both mobile apps. It's just a flat $3 a month extra. So that's handy for people on the, so to speak, on the shop floor that you do not need them to report. You do not need them to have access to the web version, but you need them to report incidents and hazards. This is a great way to do this. So this is the mobile app, STEMS One. This is primarily for reporting incidents and hazards. And I'm hoping you can see that on the screen. It looks like in my preview I can, that you can see it. But for some reason, I am being caught out. It's okay. I'll just try the existing version here, but for some reason I am having trouble with It's just decided that it's not going to show anything. All right, this is the existing Stems One app. We've got a new one coming out shortly that I won't be able to show you, but it's just as simple as that, where the user can report incidents and hazards. They can also manage actions. All right, so keep that in mind. You can raise actions against mobile-only users. You cannot create actions from Stems One, but they can manage them. So you could assign an action to that user out in the field, and they can do everything, accept them, close them out, attach files, attach photos, and so on. That's all available there. All right. So quite often surprised how many people are not fully aware of what can be done via the Stems One mobile app. And I know we've just gone over time, so I'll be very brief. And this is the Comply One app, and this is where you can manage. So those forms that are published from Comply One would be available to the mobile user. And so, for example, public forms. So public forms are for things that need to be done on the fly. There's a vehicle pre-start check. And this is all customized. I've set up the fields I want to utilize. And even the way you want the user to select, whether you want a drop-down box, radio button, and so on. They can add photos, files. They can suggest actions and hazards. And also there is the ability to even have sign-off on the screen, which I don't know how I'll go for time here to quickly get through this. But again, you may not be aware that we do have the field, although I'm not going to be able to show it on here, signing off on the screen. And so be aware of that. In the footer section, there is the ability for people to sign off on the screen and record that signature. Another feature we're about to release is this one here. You won't see this yet, but you will be able to email completed forms to other people. So hopefully that's of some benefit or interest to other parties out there that are watching today. We are going to release that pretty much in the next couple of weeks, this ability. All right. Okay, everyone. Well, I am going to leave it at that because I know I'm going over time. And but I will say thank you very much, everyone, for your time.